Hello, everyone. I'm Weam, Shawgi. This podcast go to AMEL Project, Sudan Democracy Project. Today we're gonna speak about how African feminism solidarity can be a political opportunity to make or achieve peace in Sudan. We are three today. We're gonna just talk and speak how we see that. It's gonna be by English, but also a little bit in Arabic. Um, ازيكم كلكم من وئام. نحن ثلاثة الليلة حنتونس معاكم وحنشوف انه هل التضامن النسوي الافريقي هو فرصة سياسية انه احنا نحقق اي سلام جاي في السودان. I want to introduce my guest, my friend, Iman. She's a feminist, a researcher from Noon Feminist Movement. It's a Sudanese grassroots feminist movement starting in 19, to make more visibility to Sudanese women on the street during the revolution, and after that been focusing on documentation, oral stories, and the women and activists, how there's activism during the military environment. And another one, we have Tigist from Ethiopia. She's a researcher and data collector, working with a woman, with a feminist, and to document how the experience of the war and how the activism in Ethiopia and how to be safe in digital spaces. Welcome, all of you. It's mic for you, Tigist, if you want to say more about you.
Hello, hi everyone. My name is Tigist. I'm from Ethiopia. I work. Actually, you said so much about it. I work in organization called Association for Progressive Communication. I am the research lead for Feminist Internet Research Network. And this time in Peru, we do work on technology-facilitated gender-based violence. My particular interest as an African feminist in Ethiopian and someone who is acutely focusing on the chaos in eastern parts of Africa, that I am interested in expanding the idea of technology-facilitated gender-based violence, or even violence in basically. And so, actually, that is also the reason why me and we are met. So I'm very happy to be here and looking
Thank you,
forward to
thank
the
you,
event.
thank you, thank you, Tigist. Iman, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Weam, and thank you, Tigist. So let me talk more about Noon Feminist Movement. Noon's work focuses on research, documentation, and creating a contextualized feminist and queer feminist knowledge for the Sudanese feminist and queer community. And Noon Feminist Movement, we are committed to supporting the capacities of activists, feminist activists, and LGBT activists. And we also advocate for women human rights and SUGI rights. And by SUGI rights, I mean the rights of sexual orientation and gender identity groups and communities. So we basically work with grassroots and from the grassroots and to the grassroots.
Thank you, both of you. Before we start in the question and make our coffee to start this chat, we're gonna make a little bit introduction about the Sudan situation now. Sudan been during the revolution since when the Islamic regime coup in help me with that 1989.
Okay, 1998.
Okay.
89.
89.
Yes.
I think we hate this time. We hate this date. That's why I'm facing a lot of problem to pronounce it or to say it. We've been fighting that regime since that time, but our revolution succeeds in 2018 when it started, and we followed the regime in 6th of April 2019.
A lot of dates.
And we think our revolution succeeds, and after 2 years the military coup happened in 25th of October 2021, and from that time we've been fighting the coup, fighting the women's rights, even during the revolution, sadly. And after 2 years, after 1 year and a half from that coup, the war start or the war broken in 15th April 2023. And now after more than 500 days of war, we're still talking because a lot of events happen, political events happen in international community. But my question is all the time why we didn't think about the African neighbors, the African unions as a people, not as a government, how we can make more visibility of Sudan situation, the femina, the rape, اسمها شلون فيضانات
Floods.
the floods.
Yes.
We're facing all that, but the international community just make it's like just a struggle between two general, and we want to achieve a ceasefire, but no one knows about the struggle of women and the people of Sudan. With the coffee, I wanna start with a question for you, Tigist. I'm already saying the answer, but I wanna know your answer. What do you know as a Tigist before you met us about the Sudanese context in the last 5 years? Don't take my answers, please.
I think for me, 2018 and 2019 is very important time for Sudan, specifically the revolution, the success that it brought, and for us specifically, again talking from an African feminist space, it was some most inspiring historical moment because the revolution was led by women. And when I say women, I'm not saying the people who are in front and on the camera or the pictures. I'm saying the women on the ground and grassroots level. Although obviously the visibility from the pictures that also in some ways helped the movement, but that doesn't mean like I'm thinking about 5-6 people. I'm thinking about Sudanese women in a bigger context. And I think that was the most inspiring places because that was a place of thinking about feminist movement building or movement building by women and what it can do at a national level. And so the hope is to have a democratic and civilian government, and then to move from there. And again, for us, from a feminist perspective, also looking at how now that women have led the movement and contributed so much, and then what are we going to see? So my perspective and viewpoint or focus was on the progress in which how things keep on moving and the ways in which women's right movement or question or even women in the place become sidelined and at the backseat of the conversation more and more as the war and conflicts become much more permanent in the place. Then you could also see then women become one of the victims, as usual, the victims of the war. And then the state we are now with, where we see I think similar to Ethiopia. For me, it's a country on a war with itself. The same with Ethiopia being a country on a war with itself. Then that's one of the predicament of our situation, where we have different warring groups wanting to seize some power, political or otherwise, and then having that war, but in the mix of it, and then peaceful people, civilians get to be affected by it, and then you produce a nation that is migrating, a nation that is fleeing from their countries, and so we are observing that. More than that, also, as you have mentioned it, Weam, for me, the other painful part is also the ways in which how the war in Sudan is not being publicized much, as the crisis is happening and is still happening. But then also I am again very much aware how the same situation is happening in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is still in war. Nobody knows. Or nobody pays attention. I do not understand why, but Ethiopia is still in war. The same is happening in DRC Congo. And I'm sure there are other places too. So that's a puzzling fact for me, like thinking about like, how do we do this work? How do we then think about our solidarity within the eastern part of Africa? And center Sudan's situation permanently on our media spaces, and as we are also, as an Ethiopian, as I am carrying Ethiopia also wherever I go. And so, yeah, these are my understanding of it. I'm more invested in the ways in which the movement and the politics is moving between space and time, and the learnings that we have about the ways in which people are looking at us as an African people, and also the ways in which we are being also carrying ourselves in the African spaces. Yeah.
Let me take it from there to Iman. Yeah, Iman, all the time you talk about the lack of solidarity, and it's a reason of lack of information. Why we didn't know about each other like we know about another people or another situation, another conflict?
It's it's a very important question to ask, but I believe in order to answer it, we need to analyze what happened to our countries in the colonial state before discussing where are we now in the post-colonial state. I don't think we are in the post-colonial state yet, but I think we should discuss that first, because when we are talking about Sudan, we are talking about a region. We are not just talking about a country that is isolated in the middle of the sea. We're talking about a country that is bordered, shares border with Egypt, Chad, Libya, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Central Africa. So we are talking about a country that is positioned in a geographical space where it doesn't share a language, let's say, where we don't share, even in Sudan itself, we don't share like same, what is it called? ثقافية.
Cultural.
Yeah, we don't share a common cultural ideas. We don't share common values. It's different from like northern state, east state, or like so on. So and I believe we've been fighting for too long in this continent that we are burnt out, we are exhausted, we are tired, we are impoverished. We are so poor to the point that we can't even like think about the future to know what's happening or what's gonna happen. We are still concerned about, are we gonna eat today? Are we gonna be able to provide for ourselves and our kids in the future? Are we gonna be able to provide good education for our kids? So for a demographic like that, to ask why you don't know about other people around you, I don't speak their language, I don't know much about them, I'm too poor to actually do or know anything. Even if I know, what am I gonna do with that knowledge? Like, okay, I'm a woman sitting in my house in the global south in Sudan, in a city where like I can't provide for myself, I can't work, I'm being subjected to violence from the society, from men in my life. Yet you expect me to know about women in Ethiopia and in other countries? That's very difficult. And again, the language barrier. No one is talking about that enough. In Sudan, we're not even part of the East African collective. We can't even go to South Sudan. That was once at a time, like we were one country. We can't go there without a visa. And we're not even part of the Jamaat al-Duwal al-Arabiya. Let's translate that later. Where we're supposed to be part of the Arabic collective. We're not even there. Yet we are not receiving support from here nor there, because no one thinks that we belong to that context. No one sees us as African, and no one sees us as Arabs, and that's fine. But we need to focus on how we gonna position ourselves in this context. How we gonna present ourselves. Are we gonna wait for them to support us and to know about us, or it's our mission now to reach those demographics, those nationalities, those women in different contexts, and be like, we are fighting the same thing. We are fighting systems. We're not fighting men. We're not fighting governments alone. We are fighting systems here. So yeah, that was a long answer, but yeah.
But the long answer make me to remember, because you say something so important, and this is like a late talk, no one talk about it, especially in the context of Sudan, how we are different. I remember before maybe 2 or 3 years, I was in middle of Darfur. I'm interviewing women with the perspective of women came from Khartoum. How do you know about the revolution? And there was one woman, she's well educated, medical assistant, told me we was in the middle of nowhere in Sudan and there was a war, and we talked to the soldiers, okay, let us have like a moment, just a day to have our thing from the market. And she paid to charge her phone, and she figured out the regime fall for 2 months ago. They didn't know about that.
She didn't even know that.
No. And she's
They
Sudanese.
took down the regime. So see, even women in Darfur didn't know what we were
Yes.
doing in Khartoum, because it's the borders. The borders don't make any sense. The borders that were set by the colonial system like put so many people in like one country, and they labeled us as we are Sudanese, regardless of the language, regardless of the religion, regardless of the context.
Yes.
So it's very difficult to achieve
And
that.
also I asked them, I was like having a moment of silence. Okay, now I'm talking with the privilege. And another woman from the university there, she told me, do you know when the revolution started in Khartoum, even we didn't know that. And when we saw the videos, and too late because we didn't have network signal to know. And another people say, no, this is a fake videos. There is no revolution happened. And she told me, even we cannot read the Arabic thing. Even to talk to the community, we need to use a local language. The Khartoumlians didn't include us as a Sudanese.
Yes.
And that invisible borders, because we all Sudanese. And that also a lack of information. And the language I was talking to, when I met Tigist, I was apologize for my English. And Tigist make a statement, why we apologize for colonial language. Why we cannot even talk with our mother native language. And that, okay, this another border, the language, the color, the religion. Even when you talk about the common culture, when we went to New Eve in Ethiopia, we figured out, okay, we share the same music, but we didn't know that before. We share the same dancing, but we didn't know that before.
They call the Zenig music in Sudan that we're used to Amapiano. Amapiano is Zenig.
Oh my
But we're
God.
now just knowing about this. So yeah, we are way behind, but I think we have good chance. I would love to hear from Tigis what she thinks about language justice and how we are forced to speak in a language that doesn't represent us, yet it's the only way that we are communicating now, actually. What do you think, Tigis?
I think I think this was conversation also that happened in the meeting that we have had with Weam around how we are also forced to speak in different language that are not our mother tongue, our native language. But then that's related to your point around colonialism. No, it's something that unfortunately me and Weam, or me and you cannot be having this conversation if it wasn't for English. That's the saddest part of it. But then again, we have to figure out ways in which to promote an indigenous language that are, progressive enough or spoken by many, for example. And I was referring to Swahili. For example, Swahili has been spoken for over 7 countries, if I'm not mistaken, but might even be bigger than that. And why not use that to actually promote? Because it's been spoken by many places, not at the expense of other indigenous language. Someone said in the meeting, I remember, I think it's, I can't name the person. She said something about nobody is a minority in our world. They are being minoritized. And that's a very different thing, no? And so we have many language. Like I come from a country that has over 86 language. But then we nationally speak one language, no? Or I think we're becoming now 2 at least. But that doesn't mean like I can't speak my tribe language. I need to create a space for it. I need to make it more visible. But at the same time, there is that compromise that you need to do, even when you know that there is an injustice going on. But at least this is making it possible for the 3 of us to have a coffee. As heartbreaking as it is, no? So something about the progress of coloniality. So Weam, you said something earlier, I think supported by also Iman, that there is a continuous coloniality. It's not like we have now passed through it and then post-colonial states. No, we're not. We're not. It's still there. Imperialism is still there. So the injustice is still there, but I don't know if we can have a radical transition into all of a sudden we're going to speak this language. I don't think it works. Unfortunately, so we have to do this compromise and then figure out for ways in which to work with language that are much more progressive in their, at least in the ways in which a number of people speak them in Africa. I know from Southern Africa, like in Osa, Zulu, Ndebele, and there are languages that are much more spoken in SADC area that are very similar. So there were one conversation that was happening this side around, like, can we use that one language to kind of talk about different things or even publish based on that? I don't know how far they progressed with that conversation. So yeah, it's a work in progress, I guess.
You know what I love and hate about intersectionality? Make me think about a lot of things, but I know it's hard to achieve. Now I was thinking, why is education system it's not including African language? We just learning us about English in Sudan, example, and another place French, but no, there is no African language in our education system. I think that's a question for the future.
I don't know what was our language before colonialism, and I'm not talking about the British colonialism or the Egyptian British colonialism. I'm talking about even the Islamists.
Yes,
When Islamic groups and Muslim groups like invaded Sudan to spread Islam.
Yes.
What were we talking of before that? I have no idea.
I'm Nubian.
I never heard anyone like speaking about that too.
I'm Nubian, but I didn't speak the language. I remember my grandmother, rest in peace, when she's pray with her language because she cannot talk to Allah with a new language. She didn't grow up with this language.
And I'm very happy that parts in Sudan, like the Nubians and like
Nuba Mountain.
And Nuba Mountains, like they managed to sustain and like to protect their language, despite if they're not even like use it in education or like in public events. That's something, but at least they know their language, they know their heritage, and I believe that's what now we're doing. We are erasing that. We are speaking a language that doesn't represent us, yet it is an easier way to communicate. But aren't we losing our narrative that way? Because like now I'm speaking in English, but I know if I was speaking in my native, I would have said much more.
Yes.
I would have expressed much more. So yeah, I totally agree with Tigist. It's a process. So we're starting it, but it will take time.
I hope, Tigist, if you can speak your language or you can understand our language. But I think this is for the future, how we can make it more solidarity. And that take me to the second question. Do you believe there's any experience, feminist solidarity in the global south, contribution to achieve a peace? Like when we know about Liberia, but know about what happened. Well, I don't know a lot of feminism.
Can I answer that before Tigist? I'm sorry, Tigist, but I had something to say here because the question itself it made me like very angry. So okay, so I don't believe that peace as its concept that we understand commonly is something that we need to achieve now. I don't agree with that narrative. Peace is not simply the absence of conflict. No, it's a whole dynamic, like where communities, individuals, nations experience stability, security, mutual respect, and so on. How can we do that if we are still under the effect and the shackles of colonialism, patriarchy, capitalism, whatever? How can we do that? That's one point. Second point, how can women from like Sudan, Chad, Ethiopia, Congo, Eritrea work towards peace when they don't even have the autonomy to control what's happening inside their houses? What do you mean, like, achieve peace? We didn't create
with your body.
we didn't create the war so we can, like, achieve peace. That's not our issue. So how can we solve that? That's number 2. Number 3. I've always,
She's so angry.
Yes, I am, because the question was like, is that my fault now to fix? What do you mean, like, works toward peace? So, and I always struggled with the understanding of why do we need to achieve peace? Why peace? Why not freedom? Why not liberation? Our issue is not peace. Our issue is we are under control of other people who are benefiting from the wars in our countries. So unless we break this cycle, unless the people are making money from us dying, are not making that money, there will not be peace. It's not about political participation. It's not about women not being there. It's not about we're not doing enough. It's simply a fight that we didn't create that benefits people who are supporting, and now we are supposed to make peace with it. Or call people for peace. No, we should fight. We should be free. We should liberate ourselves. Then, when we are there, when we destroy all of the systems and we're done with it, maybe we should focus on the next generation so they can maybe build healthy communities with hopes. But at this point, we should be angry. No peace. Peace is not for us. We are angry. We need to fight. We need to liberate ourselves. Then maybe when we are done, and when the colonial systems pay all what they have to pay for years and years of killing and marginalizing and, like, affecting people's life and culture and everything, then maybe we can seek peace. But peace, for me now, it's a word created by white man when he realized that we are too angry and we will take that system down. So now he is calling for peace.
And well-being.
I'm done.
The healing.
Tigis, do you?
Before Tigis talk, this is not an ad. This is like اسمه شنو توضيح. Clarification. After more than 500 days of war in Sudan, the report, and it's limited, up to 500 women, girls, children, being under rape as a tool of war, as a tool of immigrate people to send them out of their houses inside Sudan, and with this, so not little, with nothing of help from the international community can help us even with the rape kits, helping us with abortion bills, because when it's come to a woman body, in the war, they told you, there's a law we should to follow. Sudan is not allowed for abortion bills.
But women should participate in peacemaking.
Yes. And you, as you said, you didn't have even control of your body, that being a war woman.
Yeah.
To do that, from using this platform, we want to talk, if you want to achieve a peace building or ceasefire, you should start with women who base since day one with their body, the price of war. And okay, now Tigist, be angry.
That was a delicious argument. I'm not saying it's a good, it's a delicious, like I loved it. And I think it's on point, and I don't think this was actually so there is this constructive and destructive anger, and I always encounter this kind of anger as constructive, because you are trying to build something that is not there, and to try to bring into the table something that is very invisible for many people. And I agree with you, this peace conversation is much more with international organizations and funding and all that. I mean, ridiculous. It gets ridiculous even when they bring in peace and security keepers to different countries, including my country being one of the countries who have contributed to the importation of security military men or whatever for peace and security. Like, people come with gun to create peace, and I don't understand the logic even. And so it's laughable. So I understand that. And I think it's very powerful when you say, I want freedom, I want liberation first. So because that actually is the achievement of peace, no? Like if I have a freedom and liberation to be who I am in my country and to be safe in my own way, then I actually achieve the peace. So it's the procedure of the stuff doesn't really even make sense. So on point, it's a delicious argument. I just want to add one thing here is that in terms of global South conversation, I think this is where my anger comes in also. For me, it always has been a painful process because we say there is a global South conversation, we forget that there is a power dynamics between global South itself. I know that in many feminist advocacy spaces, to insert the conversation about Ethiopia or Sudan, others, it's such a struggle. Or when you get even the space, it's a very symbolic place where you are positioned as a tokenistic thing, which is very difficult too, because on one side you want to give airtime and space for your country or for the region that you want to talk about, but on the other side you can see the amount of obliviousness that you see from even within the global south, that you see people being just using some representative boxes that because I am a black Ethiopian, that I just to list and say like we have Ethiopian women, Sudanese women in the space, and so that makes it global South conversation. That always makes me very angry, and I feel like you have to be intentional. You really need to be intentional with the ways in which you want to construct this solidarity conversation. We are not here for you to have more airtime and budget or funding. We are here to talk about our pain and suffering. And then we ask you for the solidarity. And you need to be very much cognizant of that. Sometimes they even invite you with a space like which conversation or with invitation that doesn't even make sense. And you say, like, how do you make sense of this thing? Like this happened 20 years ago. Why am I talking about it now? Why can't I talk about what's happening right now like in Ethiopia? Like, can I talk about it? Why are you cherry picking about the conversation that I need to have in the table? And then again, controlling the ways in which I speak. So there's something about that that's not being talking about, because it's also again a colonial construction that we are being very much distracted with the conversation that we have with the global north, which is the instigator of war and destruction in the African spaces and countries. And so we are so much concerned about the global north, we forget that there is still also a power dynamics and an ugly form of solidarity that is happening around our corner in the name of global south conversation. And that is how the war in Sudan, in Ethiopia, in DRC Congo, in other African countries are not being given platforms, because right now the responsibility is somewhere else. And then if you want to be a woke global South feminist advocate, then you need to pick those that are very much having much more airtime on the online spaces or other places, so that you can look for or sound like a progressive, as opposed to countries that are very poor and nobody is looking at, which is Ethiopia and Sudan. Why would you? Or when you are pressured, you put them on the table and then you tell them, like, please speak about this only. What the fuck does it mean? Like, why would I tell you one thing? Why? Why do you invite me in that space and ask me to say the one thing? And that might not even be relevant for the current situation that I'm sitting in. And so there's something about so radically wrong in the ways in which we form solidarity. And most specifically Africans pay so much to that. We pay so much. We are neither here nor there again. And that really makes me angry, especially when I'm invited in spaces like that. And then I feel like I'm being used as a tokenistic. Then I don't know how to deal with that. So yeah, that's where I'm coming in.
No.
Yeah, I want to add to what Tigis said is I 100% support everything she said, but I also want to add one more aspect to our context, since we are analyzing Sudan's context. In the 30 years of Omar al-Bashir regime, it was activists and representative of Sudanese civil society were engaging in the regional and international advocacy efforts. It was people who represent Omar al-Bashir regime who participated and engaged in events like that. So in 30 years, we have lost a lot of time and a lot of support because no one was actually familiar with that real narrative. Because al-Bashir supporters were spreading the false narratives of everything is going well in Sudan. We don't need anything in Sudan. We are Arabs. We're not part of the Africans. Blah, 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 all that bullshit. Only in the past 5 years, I believe, Sudan has begun to re-engage in the world. And the global attention sparked when celebrities started to engage in campaigns like Blue for Sudan.
Yeah.
People then started to know. But personally, me as an activist, as a queer African activist, I've experienced this type of disconnection between me and other fellow activists, African fellow activists. Like every time they ask me where are you from, and I'm like from Sudan, and they were like, oh, South Sudan. I'm like, no, Sudan. And I love South Sudan. Like, I know we are all like, eventually we are sharing this struggle, but it hurts when like a country that I share border with, and maybe I know 0.5% of their context, they don't even know that us and South Sudan are two separate nations at this point. So yeah, I believe this is an effort we also need to do, but again, we are way under the influence to have our own opinion and to be able to act upon it, you know?
I think, yeah, Iman, that take us to the guilt feeling. We all bury that guilt as, okay, we know the privilege and we know our government being racist, being advocate for false. And if we want to talk, like we feel guilt and shame. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I love South Sudan, but I'm not from there. I'm from Sudan. I'm so sorry because I'm from Sudan. I'm so sorry I'm from Ethiopia, not Palestine.
We are, yes. We are guilty. We do feel the guilt. And I believe this is part of our intergenerational trauma that we are sharing. And I'm not talking about intergenerational trauma as white people talk about it.
Yeah.
No. I'm talking about our grandmas and our ancestors being subjected to slavery. They were slaved. They didn't even like have the power to decide what they were gonna eat, if they were gonna live today. We are talking about colonialism versus now we are supposed to have our own power, but that's not happening. So for me, that subject needs from us to work, needs from us to move forward in it. I don't know how we're gonna do it, but I believe we need to have more conversation like this. We need to talk with each other more. We need to like reconnect again as like people from the countries we've been mentioning since we started this conversation. We need to talk, and not just talking in the UN lobbies and I don't know, convention. No. We need to sit down with our communities and have this conversation.
Back to our conversation, I'm taking from there. We talk about the colonialism, and we talk about how the white idea treating us. At the same time, we reaching them out to help us with our peace or freedom or our liberation.
Ask who?
Ask the white. Now when Sudan war start,
I never asked anyone for anything. I didn't ask.
I mean, the collective
And it's funny
effort.
for me when they call for ceasefire. It's so funny for me. It's like ceasefire now, or like when they say like we need more humanitarian aid. These demands are so funny for me because, again, this is not the issue.
It's not the issue.
You can't say that Sudan is lacking the fund and humanitarian aid. We are number 13 in the world regarding gold. We are number 13 in the world. How can we export gold and receive human aid? That doesn't make sense to me.
It's not make sense, but in the same time, because this is okay, we don't have a question anymore, but this takes us to talk about reaching out the colonialism to help us with our peace. In the same time,
Anyone does that. Anyone does that is not part of this liberation movement. You can't ask your oppressor to free you. Tejas, help us here.
Let me ask the question first.
Yes, I know, and that not just make me funny. It's like make me confusion. That I'm gonna include another question with this because it's the similar context. When we talk about feminism solidarity or grassroots experience or grassroots solidarity, in the same time, I remember when the war started, there was like a grassroots initiative try to make peace between those generals, but they stopped that as a government and they said, no, we're gonna go to Jeddah to help us with achieving peace. And now Jeddah, it's not work, let us go to Switzerland, go to Geneva. There's another one in Egypt. Oh no, even Libya have a peace conversation about Sudan. But at the same time, you didn't even go to grassroots opinion about peace, liberation, about our resource, and we go to the white. Please help us to stop this war you started.
Because it's people who are benefiting from this war, making sure that it will continue. Because let's take a look of all the locations they've been having dialogues in. They went to Jeddah. Sudanese army is well known for years that they are been exporting Sudanese soldiers to
Yemen.
to fight in Yemen war against Houthis. Doha is in Qatar.
Yes.
Qataris are well known that the majority of their army is Sudanese soldiers.
And they support the Islamic brother regime.
Yes. Okay, what else? UAE is also part of this negotiation and the whole this play, this ridiculous play. UAE is also familiar that they are using also Sudanese soldiers. So all places, they are having their dialogues in, they are negotiating peace, this peace thing is literally in countries benefiting from the soldiers from this country to fight other fights. This war will never end unless we are talking in Sudan. The war is in Sudan. Don't take this conversation out. And I understand maybe it's hard to sit in Sudan because it's not safe, but go regionally. Why are you going to Doha? Why are you in Jeddah? Why are you in Switzerland?
Yes. The second question, it
let's
will
take
be,
it. Let's
where is Ethiopia? But before where is Ethiopia, this is like a little advocacy information. I want all of you hearing us to go Google it and find about the Khartoum project, how the EU supporting the militia to save border for unlegalization. اسمها شنو الهجرة الغير شرعية.
Illegal immigration. Yeah, illegal immigration.
And now the EU say, no, we didn't do that. But they did the same now with Lebanon. And before we go expanded about this, okay, Tigist, where is Ethiopia?
Where is Ethiopia in relation to what? I missed the link.
We talk about the political event and peace talking, go to Jeddah, Qatar,
We are basically talking about the international influence, about what happening in our local context. How is Saudi Arabia, UAE, US, also governments are responsible of what's happening in our regional context. So yeah.
This is funny, but let us use هنا Ethiopia أخت بلادي.
Sisters of my country.
Yeah, it's been like a joke when they talk, the Sudanese people being like sisterhood or brotherhood with Ethiopia. And now let us talk, okay, how Ethiopia influence or our neighbor influence regarding to when we ask about the African or global South solidarity to stop this war, achieve peace, but we say, okay, this is not real, let us talk about liberation. What do you think?
So I think there are a few things that have been okay. So I want to start from Iman's conversation. So I think in terms of this peace conversation, I think they call it diplomacy, no? Like, so it's because of the diplomacy that you go to Khartoum, Egypt or Jeddah or Switzerland. The same thing with Ethiopia, with the Americans, with the Germans, whatever. The list of the countries are so long that I don't even know how to name them. But then it's called in the international relations and diplomacy, So that's a very politically induced, strategized, with an extension of aid for an extension of military equipment, gain, and an extension of other political and economical thing for the government. That's between the governments that has been happening. Nothing is, as you say, is being considered from the local or the community perspective. That's because our governments, let's face it, don't pay attention to their people, no? And unless otherwise you are not rich enough to influence their income or their decision. If you are the poorest of the poor, why would they look into it? And for me, I always say the ways in which I measure a government's democratic structure, or even a government that is caring for people, is looking at how they are dealing with the most marginalized and vulnerable communities at that specific time in history. And then oftentimes, and it's similarly, we see that they actually use and abuse the positions in which people are being made to be living in, which is a very dependent on aid and famine, all that. So that you create the crisis, you make people so much dependent on aid, and at the same time, you sell that vulnerability to gain more access for more military, more economical stuff, more corruption for yourself. So that's a very ugly kind of conversation. But let's not forget the fact that they are also stories that we can hold on to and give us hope around how people to people do the work. So now, whenever I'm asked politically, if it's a politically induced question around where is Ethiopia when Sudan is happening, I'm sorry, I don't know how to answer that question, because I know that Ethiopian also asks like, where is Sudan when it? That's very far away from me, because I don't operate in the state space. But I know that there are Sudanese people that I can call on to when something is happening from Ethiopian side. And I know Sudanese people do actually also call into or even migrate to Ethiopia when something happens. And I know that the ways in which we migrate between the countries is also very much interesting. Like during the war now between in Tigray region and then in Amhara and Afar region, majority of people were migrating to Sudan. And now Sudan is happening an issue that Sudan is also migrating to the Ethiopian spaces. And I know on the ground we have this open door culture where we accept everyone and then be with it. But then when you look at the government, it's completely different conversation. Yes. And so there is two layers of things that are happening. I know our culture is saving us on our everyday life of survival. We have a rich culture that really gives out, that really loves people. And I'm speaking for Sudan, I'm speaking for Ethiopia, I'm speaking for other East African countries too. There is that culture that sustains us. But the politics is so much messed up that I don't know how to even talk about it. And so for me, when people ask me like, where is Ethiopia? I tell no, as an Ethiopian, I take responsibility for how, in the ways in which I support Sudan and how things are happening. And then there is another layer that we don't talk about, which is specifically something that we have learned from Sudan, specifically from the learned from Sudanese organizing by themselves. Now we know that there is no support. We know that there is no airtime on newsrooms or something. We know that there is no solidarity for Sudan, even though continuously we keep on saying, keep an eye on Sudan. But then, interestingly, there was so much GoFundMe happening, so much, support from here and there, people moving between places, supporting for medication, supporting for transportation, supporting for visa, support, like you could see, and then you see like, yes, there were corruption within that self. So we talked about it before between you two, the three of us, that's another conversation. But still some things happen. So people show up for people. Let's not forget that, right? Because that's where I live. And that's what my hope is, actually. Yes. People show for people. And the same thing with Ethiopia, too. I mean, within the Tigrayan war and again with the Amhara and Afar region, there were so many support from the people. Yes. GoFundMe and other places, medication. I remember people sending so many medication from other places, like really collecting it by online meetings like this, and then figure out who is going to this country. Can we send with you one luggage of medication so that you could support the community? People carrying luggage as their own responsibility and supporting it. So those are stories that we have to hold on to, because our governments are not actually, really are not. That's why I keep saying it's a country that is a war with itself. So when something is a war with itself, it's really difficult to open up and see what is available in your reach. Like you have a rich culture, you have a rich and kind people who just need peace for themselves. They don't even ask you for anything. But still, you have to go outside of the state and then figure out somewhere else to get you. And then it's not even a peaceful country that you go to. Like Iman said, those are the countries that actually give you weapon too. Like, so how do you make sense of that? So for me, it's a bit complicated, but I like to stay with the layer where I see people moving between places and spaces and make space for others.
Yes.
And then really show kindness, because that's where we live on our everyday life. Honestly, that's how we survive. So actually,
I
yeah.
think this is lead us to our final question. How we, it's not like just point, it's not suggestions, but how we empower more feminist action as a grassroots to make solidarity with the war happening in our context. Let us be okay. Little focus maybe in Sudan and Ethiopia, because as you said, as Iman says, okay, it's a people to people. What do you think, yeah, Iman, to make like real action as a grassroots, as a feminist?
Again, I will say it again. Okay, I don't believe we have anything to do to stop this war.
Okay, to help to survive.
I'm gonna answer. Just give me a minute.
Okay.
Okay. Again, this war is a conflict driven by men serving other men who will profit from this. So
Yes.
unless this profit stops, the war is not gonna stop. And we live in a man world, okay? No man will allow you or give you the space to contribute. So the word we're using is not contributing here. Contributing means we will add. We have the space, so we can add, we can contribute. This is wrong. We don't even have that space. We don't have the power to contribute. This like war was made by men to serve other men. So I don't believe women is the what was it called, the factor that gonna stop it. So what I would suggest, what I think, that women should focus more, us as feminist groups, on how we will protect ourselves and our communities. Okay, how we gonna provide food for women in this area and this region, how we gonna empower ourselves as women in these communities. We need to think about ourselves first as women. The issue is not like women should stop the war in Sudan. I don't believe we will stop it. I don't think this is practical thinking. I don't think it's realistic. But I believe we do have the power to make a little bit of shift in the dynamics among our communities, our small communities. We need to control there first. I'm not going to say control. Control, maybe it's a huge and bad word. But let's say we have the chance to create our communities. Serving our feminist values. Let's focus there, so we can create a generation maybe later on can fight for liberation too. But if we just focus on like the men and the politics, more women will be dead, more women will be in need for like abortion, rape kit, whatever, and we are just fighting in these holes, fighting with these politicians, fighting with these blood lord, and they're not even gonna listen to us. For them, it's us being in the room is just the UN agenda, the women representation, the women participation. We know we had 5 years in the transitional period, the alleged transitional period. It was like all about women participation, and it was all about like القرار 15 13 25 something
yes.
like that.
Yes.
It was all about women participation in peacemaking. 5 years of that bullshit. 5 years. And when the war happened, we didn't even have access to rape kit. So let's shift our focus here. Let's build our communities first. Let's create our societies with our values, with our ideas, and like hunger for liberation and freedom, instead of just like convincing these men like stop killing people, because they don't care. They don't care. We are just wasting energy, time, and resources that we don't even have. This is my opinion.
Do you mean with a community like a grassroots? Or what do you mean by communities?
I mean that now in Sudan we say that it's a feminist movement. It's a feminist movement. We have a feminist movement. I believe we need to work in this movement. So this movement in like a decade or two can actually move and select women to be in decision making. But us now, the feminist movement in Sudan now, they are still idealizing men. And that what led us to this point. Idealizing men, idealizing the army, idealizing the dictatorship that we can't rule ourselves. All this supremacist, white supremacist, colonial like ideas and perspectives, that's not us. As women, we need to create our communities that respects women, that respects human, that doesn't differentiate based on class, doesn't differentiate based on economic and sexuality or economic status.
Yes.
And that's what helped us now in this time of emergency. We were supporting each other regardless. It wasn't who are you, it wasn't where you live, it was what do you need. So let's focus there. What do we need now as women to be safe, to be protected? And maybe then we can stop whatever we want to stop.
Before go to Tigast, I'm gonna say two things. Another advocacy information during this war regarding to sexual reproductive health. Millions of women been struggling for period poverty, and they didn't have any access to reusable pads or the normal economical pads to have it. Let's focusing. We need more support of that. And another thing before go to Tigast sent me a little bit of poetry, and that's what I love to all the conversation I have with Tigast. She says, "Darling, I'm country you shouldn't go near. I'm at war with myself." This is from Apila Chisila, Soft Magic. I don't know if I'm pronouncing right. Please correct me, Tigast. And this is your time to talk. Let us take it from there. Help as a woman helping each other. Maybe we can achieve something. The floor is yours.
Thank you. This conversation has been amazing, energizing in many ways, in a way that gives you so much hope, no? Because it's as long as we are asking questions, as long as we are angry, I think there is some work that we could do. It's when we give up and we become, oh, whatever, space. That's the scariest place. So, inshallah, I'm happy. I'm happy that we are here, and I'm grateful that I'm listening to you guys. As far as I'm concerned, I think similar to Iman's intervention, I think the work has to be around our feminist organizing still. Yes, we need support. Unfortunately, we are made to be dependent on support in this form or in the other form. And of course, we have to be in some ways pragmatic in that sense that we might need support from different places, different beings, but at the same time, we also are not outside of our agency. We still have cultural spaces that we can we can have our own way of organizing. And I think here, one thing I know is we also need to be very vigilant and very clear around what type of feminism that we are speaking about. I know that, for example, Iman's reference to those feminists who have been idolizing the military or the government or justifying what is happening in Sudan. And similar to, I have seen it in the Ethiopian too. These are, let's just put them as them. They are state feminists. That is, they are working for the state ideology, and say they are working for that. So we depart from that, because as far as I'm concerned, the feminist movement should actually uphold the grassroots level, the people who are under the ground. We're not here to support and work or advocate for the government. That's not a movement building. Why is it a movement building even? I don't understand how it's become even that. So we identify that. And the other is our movement has to be very intersectional in that sense that I need to be very much informed about what is happening in Sudan, and Iman needs to be informed about what's happening to Ethiopia. I understand that there is no time and there is no space, and yes, I understand that from Iman or you need to really prioritize Sudan, and as I am prioritizing Ethiopia, but that doesn't mean that we wouldn't have a coffee moment like now to talk about what's happening and just inform about it, and that in itself is solidarity for me. It doesn't have to be in a bigger form, a bigger gesture, but in the everyday spaces as we pass by, when we see something that is really enraging, even if it's not in our state, we will show up. And that's how you also build your network. That's how I get to know Weam, and then I get to know Iman, because we were looking into other places. We met and then we start talking about it in from intersectional space. So we have to do that too. But we also have to be unapologetic in the ways in which we center our countries in the spaces. And this is also, we have discussed about it before, that there are so many movements that pull you right and left and center and telling you like, this one is important, that one is important, you should be looking at this one, you should be looking at that one. No. If my priority is my country, then it's my country. And then you have to be okay with that, because I am also dealing with a crisis. And so that's also happening here, no? Because you have to list the countries that you need to know. Yes, we have to show solidarity and list countries and talk about them, but I will still center my country, because that's where the fire is for me. That's where my home is. That's where I'm displaced from. That's where I am made, a migrant in another country and needing this and that. And so, yes, I'm sitting with pain, so I will be prioritized. So we shouldn't be apologetic around that too. And then the last one that I would say is, let's find this everyday spaces like we do now with the coffee, with the smoking, whatever it is helping us. Let's find those places and really learn from each other and show up for each other the way we do, and in a very small form, because I think culturally it's already embedded in us, and I don't know how else to be even. And we capitalize on that, and then figure out a way to get out of the system, and replace it, because I hear Iman consistent pressure around the questions about freedom and liberation, and I think that's where the center is, but how needs to be really constructed on the everyday work. It cannot be long-term, short-term kind of NGO wording, but rather actually on the everyday basis. As we move with the political crisis we are having now in the region and in our countries at the same time. Yeah.
I think we share the same feeling about overwhelming, and this is a lot of struggles, a lot of fight, at the same time a lot of hope. Maybe because all the time I was asking myself, I feel so lonely when I should to speak about my country, speak about my context, speak about the war. I mean, like Tiga says when she shared, I'm at the war with myself, and now I should to talk about the war in my country. But I think the people who listen to us to end this conversation, I think we agree there's a new terms of peace. It's not just a ceasefire. It's helping grassroots, helping each other, surviving with each other. We know the journey is lonely, and you're gonna take your journey alone, but you can survive with the collectively work.
Liberation is a collective effort.
Yes.
Yes.
And before we end this and finish this, unfortunately, and we still have this platform, even like Tiga say, with the coffee, with the smoke, with bakhur, with anything we like, and this is what we call it, our healing roots, not the white aspect of the healing and well-being. Before we end this, please, Iman, if you want to say something.
I think in Sudan, this is my message for my people. We're not gonna be free if we're gonna continue depending on funds. That's not the key. We're not gonna be free or in peace if we if we continued, actually not started, depending on foreigners and external experts who studied in their major leagues universities that we don't have access to. That's not the key. The key is to have these conversations between us. I should have this conversation. I'm happy I had this conversation with Digas, but now I'm thinking about I should have this conversation with women in my country also, like from different places. I should have this conversation with Tigas when she's with her people, when she is also with her women. I want to hear what they're gonna say. I should have this conversation with My mom too, you know? Like, what happened? Let's talk about this. Let's have our version of things. Let's have our version of feminism, our version of liberation, our version of healing, our version of peace. Not what the white man said or like the UN agenda trying to force us to implement and focus in. So, peace is not the word we should use now. We are still in fight. We are still in fight mood. Let's keep on fighting. We are fighting against systems. It's not Umar al-Bashir, and it's not al-Burhan, and it's not Ubay Ahmed, and it's not a singular person that holds a name. We are fighting systems that will continue change the faces. They will continue change the faces, and we should be very aware and very woke and very like focused on like to know, to differentiate who's really with us and who's gonna serve us and who's gonna serve the other party, but using our face and our color. That's it.
Tigist, and I share her, she sent you a lot of virtual hearts.
I love you, Tigist.
And we share hugs. I know we share it now. A lot of hugs even to you, Tigist.
Yo, thank you.
And
What do you want to say, Tigist?
yes.
I whenever Iman says like, that's what I want to say. No, I wanted to say, of course, freedom for Ethiopia, and I hope there will be a time and place for us to really work with our communities. And as beautifully Iman put it, to be in each other's spaces, even though there wasn't a space to exist before. Now that we have this space, it's border and all that, but still for me to be there and see, and for Iman and you to be here and see, work together around it. Because the peace in Ethiopia is the peace or freedom in Ethiopia is is important to Sudan as the peace and freedom in Sudan is for Ethiopia. Because I think it's something that there is this interrelationship that is happening that we need to pay attention to. And then other than that, I like to work around conscientizing people and around ways to see like how state violence is working, and how systems are being sustained, oppressive systems, how they sustain themselves. People need to know, need to understand that, and also I want to work with women who are also organizing on their own, women who raise kids that are orphaned because of the war, and just so because they feel responsible or feel so spiritually compelled to do so. But that's a work of someone who might not identify themselves as feminism as we the privileged ones are saying, but they are also doing that work. Because it's the pursuit of feminism in its innate purpose is actually social justice, and creating those spaces, and more so, earlier also you both have mentioned about narrative. We're not yet getting hold of our narrative, shaping up our narratives. It's a really written in a form of news, in a form of tweets and Facebook posts and others. I think we have to start talking about the ways in which we want to document, not only the dead, not only the affected, but also the kind, but also the people who supported, but also the people who have been, holding space for love and peace and freedom and liberation. Like these moments, we have to start writing those things. Otherwise, what would happen is there will be a book that will be written by a white man from somewhere, during the war in Sudan, from this and that. Because I have seen it in Ethiopia. Already there are 2-3 books that I've seen about the war that just happened in 2020, and all are by white men. It's like, I think about it and tell like, oh my God, here you go again, and you capitalize on someone else's story. But that's also, that's the thing about being a critical feminist, which I am becoming very much tired of. The work of critic is always halfway. That you will be criticizing, this shouldn't happen, that shouldn't happen. Yes, that's a good revelation. That's a good understanding of what's wrong. But then the question is, what are you going to do about it? If you don't do that part, then the question is, what are you going to do about it? And I think about it and tell like, oh my God, here you go again, and you capitalize on someone else's story. But that's also, I think about it critically. But the work of critic is always halfway. That you will be criticizing, this shouldn't happen, that shouldn't happen. Yes, that's a good revelation. That's a good understanding of what's wrong. But then the question is, what are you going to do about it? If you don't do that part, then you end up being complaining all the time about your cultural appropriation, your historical appropriation, your misquoted liberation, and all that. So the hard work actually is not understanding how we have been wronged by the world. The hard work is actually how we're going to correct it as a community. That's where our energy should lie. Our anger should be fed to. Yeah, that's why my last point. I look forward to having another coffee, by the way.
We will have it soon. For the people who listen to us to the end of this conversation, I want to add the political issue, the personal issues. It's the political matters that what make the feminism perspective. It's more achieving for peace, for achieving for liberation, and that why these platforms, when we talk, it's more secure, more attached to our emotional, because I hate the idea no be more using your mind, not your heart. No.
Yes.
Yes, it's
No.
and I want to also add the end of our conversation we figure out we need liberation before talk about peace. We need to support our grassroots movement, our feminism movement, by helping each other. I want to say there's a lot of lack of information caused lack of solidarity, and this is a colonialism reason when we talk about the roots issues, from the roots. And I wanna you, after you hear our conversation, read the article. I will put a lot of reference about Tig's work, about Noon work, about the paper we do it, and also another paper talk about the Sudan, Ethiopia, follow their, you can follow. I want to say, not to know thing, it's not like a تبرير.
Not to justify.
Not to justify you can know. And I remember when I know about what happened in Ethiopia, because it just come out of sudden, the account, I'm gonna say your account, I don't know you, but make injera not war. It's helped me to know a lot. This account on Twitter helping with the grassroots.
Yeah.
How when you buy something from Making Jera Not War, she's helping a lot of Ethiopian being affected by the war.
And that's literally what you and Tiga said, that feminism is not just the social, defeating the social economic justice. It's not just social economic, and it's not just that for us. For us, it's spiritual, it's emotional, but it's our definition of feminism, of our definition of spirituality, and our definition of what is justice mean in our context. So I'm very grateful for this conversation. I'm very grateful for make injera not war.
Yes.
I love injera. We should eat injera.
Yes, we're gonna do that.
But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you
I'm
for
gonna
this
end this
conversation.
with the so nice stories happened during the revolution. I was sitting with the Ethiopian lady in her house, and I remember at Sunday, she just knocked my door and she say, we wanna go to church to pray for Sudan. And and even she gave me a Bible. I'm so sad. I lost that during the war in my home, but through 5 years, when I saw that Bible, I remember that woman make all that effort to go to church with her people to pray for Sudan.
Let's send her love now.
Yes, we send you a lot of love.
And we send love to Ethiopia, and we send love to Eritrea, we send love to Somalia, we send love to everyone. We send love to our friends in Western Sahara too. We remember you guys. We are in this together. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tigers. Do you want to say something before close the recording and have the coffee?
No, I'm going to make coffee now. Thank you so very much for the session.
Thank you, Iman. Thank you, Tigist. And
you.
thank you for our solidarity. Thank you for our sisterhood. Thank you for our feminism, who treating us and helping us to understand more and be more honest about this. And we hope for peace for all of us, and live and have the chance to live in the world when we walk on the street without fear. We walk with a pride, because we know we're holding our pride. As Tigist say, we're holding our country in our back. whenever we show up in every spaces, we're gonna talk about our culture, about country, about our context. Viva!
For liberation.
Viva for liberation!
Viva for liberation, yes.
Thank you, Tigers. Thank you.
Bye.
Let's go and chat on WhatsApp.
Enjoy your
Okay.
coffee.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Weam.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye, Aman.
Bye,
Bye.
dear. Bye.